Can you really learn to speak Italian on your own and without spending any money? We'll find out.
Hi, we're Ann and Ed, and welcome to our big Italian adventure. We're a retired couple who decided to buy a house in Italy and spend half the year living and traveling in that wonderful country.
Once our house was built, we decided it was important to learn to speak Italian so that we could get the most out of our experience. We felt it was important to integrate ourselves into Italian life as much as possible so we wouldn't be just tourists forever. Now, in facing this challenge, we realized that Ed and I not only have very different personalities, but very distinct learning styles. So we approached this challenge quite differently. The one similarity was that we did it on our own and we did it for free. Well, almost. I'm going to let Ed lead off and share his language learning journey. Take it away, Ed.
First, it's my turn to tell you how I went from a total beginner in Italian to an upper intermediate speaker on my own and for almost no money. The first tool I used was a series I found in the library, an old series from Berlitz made originally in the 1950s and the 1960s. It went through all of the basic language at the beginning, up to very advanced topics 40 lessons later. And each of these lessons was built around a dialogue between primarily the main character, Signor Bertini, and the people that he met along the way on his trips and travels throughout Italy. In fact, he eventually gets married. The next addition to my study was a grammar book. I felt that I'd learned a lot of good constructions from Berlitz, but I wasn't sure I understood how they were put together and how I might adapt them for use in other situations. So I found a grammar book called Da Capo, which means from the top. It's an Italian review grammar that goes from the very basics of using the articles the this and the that, up through complicated constructions like, if I had done this yesterday, I might have not done this. Conditional sentences and other complicated situations. I worked through that, reading it and doing the exercises and checking my answers until I felt like I had a fairly good sense of how the grammar worked and how the language was put together. The next weakness I identified was my vocabulary. I'd certainly learned a lot of words from Berlitz and added some from the grammar book, but my range of knowledge was probably limited to 2,000 or 3,000 words. So I decided I need to do a more disciplined study of vocabulary. And a good way to do that, time-honored method, is through flashcards. Now, flashcards have one big drawback, even if you use them on your iPad, on your iPhone. And that's a fixed interval between times you see something. If you see the card today, then you're going to see it again in a month. And then you'll see it again in another month. And that interval is the same whether the word is cat or dog or acumen. Now, what a good way to do this, a better way than standard flashcards, is using something called spaced repetition. And this is developed out of scientific study as the best way to learn things like this. And it's the basic idea is this. Rather than having these fixed intervals, you get an interval based on how well you know a word. So if the word cat comes up, I say, oh, that's easy. And then rather than showing it to me in 3 days, it shows it to me in a week. And if I get it right the next time, it shows it to me in 3 weeks. Now, if it was acumen, maybe it's like, I'm not sure what that means. So then it shows me again in a day. And I tell it again, I'm not completely sure. So now I see it in 2 days after that. And it progresses like that. The better you say you are at the word, your knowledge of the word, the longer it makes the interval. So this makes this system very efficient. The piece of software I use for this is called Anki. And it's available on Mac and PC and on mobile devices. Now, it's all free everywhere except on iOS, where there is a small charge for it because of the additional development that was needed to do that. The Android app actually is free. Through this approach, I've probably learned an additional 5,000 or 6,000 words to go up on top of the 2,000 or 3,000 that I knew before. So I'm up to nearly 10,000 words, and that's a pretty good vocabulary. And I've built that up through Anki using it 15 or 20 minutes a day. I'll put a link to Anki in the description. Now, while I had a good basic understanding of grammar and vocabulary, I wasn't able to speak as clearly as I'd like to. And to do that on my own was going to be difficult. So I felt now it was time to have a teacher. And first I started with a live teacher. And that was good, except it was inconvenient and expensive. Then I discovered an online learning platform called Italki. And Italki is a way to match students and teachers, sort of like a dating app. You can go in there and look at the profiles of teachers and select them. And you can often get a teacher for $15 an hour, a native Italian speaker from Italy who is professionally trained. There are a lot of younger people in Italy who are out of jobs, and even very well trained, essentially professional teachers will offer these lessons. And you can start out with a lesson as little as a $5 trial. And I can give you a link to that in the description. It'll give you a discount on your first lesson. I think Italki is a tremendous value for everyone. It's been an even bigger value for me because I also teach English online on the platform. So I'm able to trade my English lessons for Italian lessons from my teacher, Anna Rita. Let me take a quick time out. If you find these sort of tips helpful, take a moment right now and hit that subscribe button. Then you'll be able to see more of the things that we're doing, not only about language learning, but about Italy in general. Don't worry, I'll wait just a second. Thanks. More recently, I've added some watching and listening. A couple of television programs that I've enjoyed. First is Rocco Schiavone. It's about a police commissioner who is transferred from his native Rome up into the northern part of Italy, where he's a bit of fish out of water. Second, I enjoy the program Commissario Ricciardi, which they've renamed as Inspector Ricciardi because it's now available through sources in the United States. And this is set in Naples in the 1930s. Very good period piece and a good way to enjoy yourself while you're learning Italian. Both of these are available through PBS Masterpiece in the US, though you could also go to RAI, the Italian broadcasting network, and through a VPN and watch them there. A third program that I enjoyed is called Meraviglie, which means marvels or wonders. It's by a presenter called Alberto Angela, and it's a series of episodes about the wonders of Italy, the historical sites, the monuments, the cuisine, the culture, done in a way very easy to understand. He speaks Italian clearly and at a reasonable pace, and is a great introduction to a lot of things Italian. On top of watching, I also do some listening. I have a couple of sources I really like. One is a podcast by a man named Marco Capelli. It's called Storia d'Italia, and it is covering the history of Italy from back in the Roman times, eventually up until today. It's right now in the 600s or 700s, working through the Middle Ages after the collapse of the Roman Empire. The other good source I could recommend is an old radio program on Rai 2 in Italy called Alle 8 della Sera, which means at 8 o'clock in the evening. And that's when this would broadcast for about 20 minutes, Monday through Friday. And every 4-week period, they would do a series about a topic. The topic might be Napoleon, it might be Alfred Hitchcock, it might be the cuisine of a certain part of Italy. And they would cover this by an expert would essentially deliver a podcast online. Again, I'll link all of these resources below in the description. If you're interested in learning or improving your Italian, what would I recommend? I would use many of the techniques that I did myself. I think having a series of dialogues where people are interacting in different situations gives you a good overview of the language. I also think that the grammar study can be helpful, but I think I would add a teacher on earlier, maybe from the very beginning or after listening to some dialogues for a short period of time. Because I think that can accelerate your learning and will help you learn the grammar and other things to lead you through. And then for entertainment, I certainly recommend the television shows and the podcasts, the radio programs. Now, a couple of things that I haven't done that I wish I had done more of. First is write. I do some writing, but I wish I had done it more regularly every day or a few times a week, because I think it would come more smoothly to me, and that's a great way to learn vocabulary because you have time to look up the words and figure out what they are. And second would be to read out loud in Italian, because I think that would help my pronunciation a great deal if I were just to speak it more. I can speak with my teacher, but I'm only speaking an hour a week that way. And if I spoke out loud from maybe the books that I'm reading, the Rocco Schiavone books that I've read, that would help me improve my language there. In our next video, Anne will tell you how she was able to learn Italian on her own and for almost no money. And you'll see that while we had some similar approaches, we got quite a few differences in the tools we used. So I think that will give you some insight into other things that you could use. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments and we'll get back to you right away. A presto!